He wanted them to stand in place of his listening wife with her sharp, blunt features and her ruined hand lost in a miserable accident in their house. He wanted to tell them about his wife, obscurely desiring to, but terrified they might laugh at him. Worse laugh at her, for what had befallen her a laughter that would be worse to him than bullets. How guilty he felt when he thought he'd come out to the war because he could not live with such trouble. The distress of his wife was worse to him than any charging Hun or gas attack. He could not look at the murky vista of such matters, although he adored her in his heart. But adoration in the heart did not necessarily allow a life that he could bear. He wished suddenly he could come down away from what he was to the men and say these things and sing the song that was most special to him. A beautiful song indeed, said Private O'Hara. O'Hara was a bit of a musician, because his brother had a band in Sligo called O'Hara's Orchestra. And sometimes he used to fill in for the piano player, who was consumptive. The sea air of Sligo was heavy with rain and moisture, and that was good for neither houses nor people with a consumption. The rooms sweated with dew-like damp, and the lungs of sufferers flared up, and blood was spat. The piano player was a giant of a man. He could walk to the top of Maeve's Carn and place his stone on top of all the others with the best of them, as tradition bid him to, but those little insects had got into him. Whatever it was, give a man consumption. Whatever it was, love the damp air and living inside a giant. So when the giant was indisposed and at home with his mother, coughing his life out, Peter O'Hara sat in with the sheet music and banged out the tunes and the ballads with his brother, the dapperest man in County Sligo, with a straw hat as neat as a king. So O'Hara rose now, like a prince coming into his kingdom, with a bit of sheet music being extracted from his army jacket, and much to the friendly jealousy, the painful friendly jealousy of Christy Moran in that ordinary spot of Flanders, he placed the music on the piano and scanned it short-sightedly, and sang a new song that they hadn't heard of. Well, it was all the rage in the music halls of England. It was called Roses of Picardy. It was a song written by a magician, Willie thought, designed to slay the hearts of simple men. Roses are shining in Picardy, in the hush of the silver dew. Roses are blooming in Picardy, but there's never a rose like you. And the roses will die with the summertime, and our hearts may be far apart, but there's one rose that dies not in Picardy. 'Tis the rose that I see in my heart. Sang wily Private O'Hara as plain as he could, so the words would pierce home with proper violence to the composure of his mates. They had never heard the song before. Many at song's end were weeping openly. My God, said poor MacNaughton. He was mopping at his eyes with his sleeve like a bad actor. His big doughy face was melting and as red as a red arse. Smith looked at MacNaughton, and then Smith patted MacNaughton on the shoulder. It was an extraordinary matter, and one that Willie vowed in his heart to remember. How softened they were by the song. It was as if for those moments they felt queerly vindicated, all doubts and sorrows abating. That was O'Hara's strange work, that Flanders night. In Picardy itself, there's one rose that dies not in Picardy. There was a long silence then again in the room. Maybe there were 60 men there, all Irishmen of the battalion, the Royal Dublin Fusiliers. And many had seen hundreds killed, and many had killed. Willie himself had killed. Was the song a memory of what they were, or was it still possible they might be ordinary, loving, imperfect fellas again in some other guise of peace? Well, Jesus, said Christy Moore, I don't know if I can stand it, or if any of us can stand it, lads, but Willie don't. For fuck's sake and the love of God, would you give us your half of Mary, please? Come on, Willie, said O'Hara, and I'll cut the tune out of the piano if you like. All right, said Willie, but it's kind of religious. And in Latin, yeah, we know, said the Sergeant Major. Isn't the fucking Mass in Latin? Should we all know our bit of Latin, don't we, lads? Yes, come on, Willie boy, Smith shouted, maybe to shift himself out of his sentimental state. So Willie started to sing the Ave Maria. Well, it was the very self-same song he had sung for the singing competition when his father witnessed his undoing. But he had heard that twiddly bit between the verses now, and he knew he was ready for it. Ave Maria. He sang in the long drawn-out notes of Schubert. Gratia plenis. That was true what his mother believed about him. He sang like an angel might sing if an angel were ever so foolish as to sing for mortal men. His voice was strange and high, but not a countertenor. It just seemed to put a knife into the air. The notes were so clear and strong. Like a true singer, he could sing soft with strength and sing loud without hurting the ears. But the Ave Maria was all the same firm tone of things. The Latin itself allowed the men to keep the song from catching in the nets and snares of memory. It was all new at the present. Seemed to be about their courage and their solitariness and the effort they made in desperation to form a bridge from one soul to another, and that these bridges were bridges of air. The word Maria they knew because it was the name of the Mother of God. From mother's knee to now they had been inculcated with all the promises and warnings of their Catholic faith. Few had gone further than the teachings of school, and their faith was bare in its bones, but strong for all that. They thought of heaven as the next stop without question. They knew it was so because their mothers, their fathers, and their priests had told them so. Willie crossed the gap between the verses with a leap, without a hitch. Barry didn't even notice. If that bloody judge could have heard him now, first prize with a fucking ribbon to prove it. Ave Maria, gratia plenis, full of grace. And many of the men caught that it was just the Hail Mary, all dressed over in other lingo. The prayer of their childhoods in their country, the prayer of their inmost minds that could not be sundered, that could not be violated, that could not be rendered meaningless even by slaughter, the core inviolable, the flame unquenchable. And Willie sang. Well, maybe in truth he was an amateur. His breathing, oh, I don't know, was jagged and awkward. But the admiration of his dead mother was in him. Indeed, as Willie's mind now leaped to think, to remember, the tone of a child in a room in Dalkey singing to his mother after the birth of his sister Dolly that killed her. His father sitting sternly back in the scullery and going out for a sudden walk into the dark, God knew where. And Willie, aged 11, sneaking in to see her. A thing he had forgotten till this moment of singing, to be with her, and him singing that song to her with the pennies on her eyes, and the midwife cleaning the baby in the front parlour, and no one there in the bedroom, only the distant heave of the Dalkey sea, and his song, Ave Maria, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, and his mother's face, not listening and listening. And similarly now, he sang for these ruined men, these doomed listeners, these wretched fools of men, come out to fight a war without a country to their name, the slaves of England and the kings of nothing, in Christy Moran's secret, bitter work. Thank you.
Seems to have grown since I put that in. So in a state of utter recklessness now, having finished my 4 months' work, I'll tell you anything you ask me.
Did you have to do a lot of research?
Well, I think it's a common, I mean, I've seen other writers say it, that curiously enough, a lot of your research is done after you've read the book. Good research is always done backward. Because what you're after is the remnant whistle tunes of things in yourself. And nothing else will make a book. And you can read all the books in the world, but it's not going to help you. In fact, it might hinder you because to make a book, you might have 2 facts. Like, I did have 3 uncles, 3 great uncles in that war. You know, my great-grandfather was in the Navy and all this. And you might have 2 facts to rub together. And that's quite enough. Because if you have more, you know, you haven't hands enough to light the fire with them. At the same time, although I had scandalously and unabashedly half made up the Crimean War for a play that I'd written before, I thought I couldn't quite make up the First World War. And not only that, but I actually wanted to see for myself in this vexed question of our participation in the war, what people had actually gone through. Because I had the vaguest, foggiest notion. I mean, my grandfather was in the British Merchant Navy in 1918, and then he was